Palestinian territories through Israel, and those customs unions not at the moment being passed on to the Palestinian Authority that runs the West. So they can't pay their civil servants, they can't pay for their government services, and that is a scheme essentially being pushed by hard-right members of the Israeli coalition government to starve the PA of resources, and that's also a major issue for Europe.
I spent a little bit of time in Europe recently. I can confirm what David says on the streets around different places I went. European opinion is unambiguous and pro-Palestinian, and to an extent anti-Israel, to a large extent. Both of those things, you see it everywhere. It's unambiguous despite the actions of leaders and foreign ministers across the EU. So thanks for that insight, David. Meanwhile, back in Israel, you mentioned this just a moment ago, Elizabeth. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's ruling coalition suffered a blow. We just talked about this in brief. Two ultra-Orthodox parties left his right-wing coalition government. The departures are due to go into effect on Sunday. It's not clear whether the departures would leave Netanyahu with a minority in government. Jack, why do these parties say they're leaving the government? Is it over Gaza? Is it over West Bank settlements? What's the route? Are they willing to risk Netanyahu's government here?
Well, it's simple. They say that Netanyahu's not doing enough to protect yeshiva students. So those are students that study rabbinical literature, Jewish philosophy, from mandatory military service in the IDF under new draft laws that Netanyahu's proposed.
This has been controversial in Israel for a long time. The yeshiva students, unlike everyone else, don't serve.
Right, and you see a broad majority of the public, especially a year and a half on from October 7th, saying that these exemptions should be ended for ultra-Orthodox people like yeshiva students. But there's just so much pressure on Israel's military. You see the National Military Reserves being significantly stretched. Now this is translating into pressure on Netanyahu, as you said. UTJ leaving his coalition takes him down from 64 to 60 seats in the Knesset out of 120. If he loses Shas, and that's confirmed on Sunday, that's down to 50 seats. So that's insufficient for majority. He's really at risk of early elections or potentially having his coalition dissolve.
Elizabeth, talk just a little bit more about the exit of these ultra-Orthodox parties and the political challenge that it presents to Netanyahu?
Well, I think these defections from Netanyahu's government could have implications for Gaza, even though that was not the reason they cited for their defections. Netanyahu, you could imagine, feeling even more pressure now to appease the remaining right-wing factions. Voices like Finance Minister Smotrich and National Security Minister Ben-Gvir, who have threatened that they too will quit, not over the military draft legislation, but over a potential ceasefire with Hamas if it stops short of ensuring the militant group's full defeat.
Meanwhile, Netanyahu under pressure across the Israeli politic that he's extending the war in Gaza, or at least doesn't have an exit plan because it means potentially the end of his own political fortunes and a trial for corruption. So basically prolonging the war for politics. So all sides for Benjamin Netanyahu right now. Relatedly, I want to talk about Syria for a moment. On Wednesday, Israel launched a series of airstrikes on Israel's capital, Damascus, hitting the defense ministry headquarters in an area near the presidential palace there. The country's health ministry said the strikes in Damascus killed 3 people, wounded 30. Israel's military said it was intervening to defend the minority Druze sect in southern Syria, whose community straddles the border with Israel-occupied Golan Heights, right on the border between Israel and Syria. David, let's backtrack a little bit. Who are the Druze, and why does Israel say they're essentially going to war with Damascus to defend them?
So the Druze were founded as an offshoot, essentially, of Shia Islam. So they're broadly part of Shiite Islam, but they actually have elements of other religions. They're an extremely closed group. There's about 1 million of them spread across Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, and a few, as you say, in Israel. Actually, more than a few. They're actually so secretive about their rights that outsiders are not allowed to know about some of their devotional practices. Why this suddenly becomes a issue of modern-day geopolitics is that there are about 150,000 Druze in Israel, and quite a lot of them serve in the Israeli military. So to go back to the point that ultra-Orthodox Jewish Israeli kids refuse to serve in the military, Druze kids have been serving in the military, and they are fiercely loyal. Because as a very small group that has been persecuted and distrusted in almost every corner of the Middle East where they have settled since they were founded in the 11th century in Egypt, they have often needed a protector because they often are very, very wary of their immediate neighbors. And that is ultimately the dynamic here in Syria, that as we wait to see whether the new government post-Assad, post the revolution in Syria, keeps its promises to be tolerant of minorities, to be tolerant particularly of Shia Islamists and Muslims, and not just impose a Sunni majority view on Syria, Israel sees a chance to present itself as a defender of minority rights in Syria. But it's also about the fact that this territory where they are, where there's currently this sectarian violence, very nasty sectarian violence, is right near the border with Israel. So this is also a security play for Israel. But it is a very, very perilous moment for the new Syrian government, because to have Israeli strikes on the Ministry of Defense in the middle of the capital, Damascus, to have Israel intervening in this way, ostensibly in the name of defending the Druze, that is an incredibly destabilizing event. And the evidence at the moment is that the Syrian government is not handling it well. Ahmed al-Shara is not keeping his promises to respect minority rights. And there is evidence, troubling evidence, that some of his own fighters were involved in some very nasty sectarian killings this week.
Well,